Hi, theology students. This is Karen Park in my house. I'm sure you're all in your houses too. Trying to make this video to kind of get started so that you can know a little bit more about what to expect going forward. And I sent you an email. I didn't get everyone's response, but hopefully I'll get a response to this. At this point, we are transitioning, as you know, to the totally online forum. And our class, luckily, I guess if there's a silver lining, our class, the way it's set up, is not going to be too hard to do in an online forum. So we have, the syllabus has been updated. We're going to continue with the same readings. Your journal will continue, and your theological interview project will continue as well. As far as class sessions, the readings will remain the same with a few minor adjustments. And this week we'll be reading Sally McFaig's Models of God, which I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. And then we'll move on to, on the 30th, there'll be an exam, and that'll be, you'll be able to take that on Moodle. And then the following week, we'll be reading Holy the Firm. And the week after that, after Easter, we'll be reading The Death of Ivan Illich, watching a film. You'll be working on your theological interview projects. You'll have a lot of time with the people in your house. And you can also do those interviews, you know, on Google Hangouts or FaceTime or whatever. So we're going to be able to do this for this class. So I want to reassure you of that. I know this is a really hard time for everybody. And I want you to know that I'm here, that we have an ability to be flexible. You've done a lot of good work already. And we're just going to keep building on that the best we can. The class is going to be, so we're going to be using Zoom. As I said in my email, if you don't have the Zoom platform or you don't have the app, please download that onto your laptop or tablet. We're going to be using that on Wednesdays for a Zoom discussion. So our whole class will be able to log in at the same time at 3:30 for a 40-minute discussion of the week's readings, and that's what we'll do. Mondays, you'll have a video from me. There'll be discussion questions, perhaps forums on Moodle. So the main thing is just to keep Wednesdays, if at all possible, at our regular class time. We'll just go for 40 minutes, in the discussion. Wednesday afternoons open for Zoom, and the rest of the class will be asynchronous. So synchronous means we all meet together. Asynchronous means you'll be able to work on things on your own time, but the readings stay the same. If you have questions about that, send me an email, or we can clarify that through Moodle or whatever. So anyway, our class is going to go on and be successful with this forum. It's easier for this class than it is for some others. You've had some really important assignments front-loaded that you've already completed. And as I said, your journal and your theological interview project, which are your main components, can go on in this way. All right, so let me know if you have questions about that. The books that we have left to read, in addition to your project, are these. We have, this week, you're reading Sally McFaig's Models of God. Then we'll be turning to Holy the Firm by Annie Dillard, and The Death of Ivan Illich by Leo Tolstoy. And we'll also be watching a film. So these texts are covering some important aspects of theology. This week we'll be talking about the idea of metaphorical theology, what that means as you read Sally McFaig. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a minute. So Holy the Firm, it's kind of I've talked about this one before. This is kind of a mystical text. Annie Dillard is trying to get us to think about some of the big issues and big questions. I think a lot of us are already in a space where we're contemplating those things. So I think that's going to be well received. And then Tolstoy's novel, The Death of Ivan Illich, is about, despite all of the challenges, despite even all the fearful things, what does it mean to live a life that's meaningful? And I'm hoping that that will also be something that resonates with us, in particular during this time when we're facing so much fear and insecurity and worry about the conditions of life. So anyway, let's get started with a few overarching ideas that I want to talk to you about as you delve into Models of God this week. So I'm going to do something here where I share the screen with a PowerPoint. So let me just try this for a minute. Okay. Is this? I think this is right. Okay, so just a couple of thoughts about metaphorical theology, which is the overarching project that Sally McFaig is engaging in this book, Models of God. She's talking about theological language. So that's really the main thing that I want you to think about as you read this book, our God language. What is it? How do we talk? How do human beings, Christians, talk about God, and what impact does that language have? And so McFaig has a couple of points that she takes as sort of foundational points in this. This theology, our last book had to do, when we were talking about the cross and the lynching tree, talking about incarnational theology, talking about race. This theology has to do particularly with language. And McFaig, the theologian, our author, makes a few assumptions about language. She believes that the language we use to talk about God matters because it affects our understanding and our behavior. What we say matters. If somebody calls somebody a name or misgenders them or alienates them, or our language has an impact in the world. Racist language has an impact in the world, and positive language has an impact in the world. McFaig is simply affirming that our language that we use to talk about God matters as well. And so as you read this, that's really what she's saying. If you believe that language matters, McFaig does as well, and she believes that our God language matters. And then she also is taking the assumption that God language cannot be literal. Nothing that we say about God could ever really be literally true, according to McFaig, because God's reality is unknowable. So anything that we say about God is going to be inadequate, because what do we know? We're just using our own language to describe something that's utterly, in the end, indescribable. So those are just kind of the main overarching concerns of the book, and that should help you as you get into it a little bit. She also believes very strongly, and that's just kind of the argument of her book, that our current language about God is problematic. It's not good. It is for a couple of reasons. And you can see here, if you look on page 9 of the introduction, Roman numeral 9, she says that our language about God is idolatrous, right there in the first paragraph. And that's a strange word when you think about language, but I want you to think about that as you read this. How could language be idolatrous? Idolatry is the substituting of something that's made by human beings for God's reality. So we often think about idolatry as, worshiping a statue, a golden calf. Catholics are sometimes accused of idolatry because of all the statues and art, that these are somehow replacements for God. And what McFaig is saying is that our language for God, if we aren't willing to question it and think about it, and if we mistake it for God's reality, can itself be idolatrous. We're substituting something that we made, words, for God's reality, which is unknowable. Okay. She also believes that our current God language, meaning our masculine language for God that refers to God always as a king or a lord or father, that's idolatrous, but it's also anachronistic and irrelevant, meaning that it comes from another time. If you look on page 3, this is where she kind of deals with this preliminary issue. She says that these words like king and lord, these come from another time. They come from a distant past. We don't live with kings anymore in our society, especially here in America. We founded our whole country on the idea that we weren't going to have kings. So what is it? Why do we even know about kings? We maybe watch the Windsors or something, but we don't really know about kings and lords. Even lords are a feudal title for like a landowner. So why do we have these old-fashioned terms? When we use words from another time, they don't have as much meaning for us. If we hear a joke from the 1920s, it's not going to be that funny to us because we don't understand the references as well as the people from the 1920s would have. So our language is outdated for God, and we've confused it with God's own nature. But the main thing, and this is, I think, really something that we'll be thinking the most about as we read this, McFay's argument is that our current God language, God as a male, a king, and a lord, is dangerous. And it's dangerous because it inspires a passivity on our part, meaning if God is a king, then we are just these loyal subjects and we don't have to take responsibility. If God is a parent, then we're just children and we have to do what he says. And that's comforting, but it's also, according to McFay, a dangerous idea because it leads us to not take responsibility for our own world. Her concerns have to do with the environment, how God language is leading to the destruction of the environment, as well as the threat of nuclear annihilation, which she sees as extraordinarily terrifying. We are now living in a time where we are experiencing a threat from a global pandemic. And so as you read this, she's talking about climate change and she's talking about nuclear destruction, but I think a lot of what she says applies to our thinking about the current situation that we find ourselves in. And as you read this, think about maybe if you have encountered people even this week who have been explaining the threat that we face right now as we try to get a handle on the coronavirus in theological language. Because I've heard some people talking about God and God's role in this. You should have your ears tuned for that kind of language and see how it relates to our readings. So that's just, and I'm going to stop this here. That's just a little bit of an introduction to the issues that we're going to be dealing with in this book. The reading it's a little dense, but you should be able to get through it. Take notes and underline places where you have questions. I'll be putting up some discussion questions on Moodle, and we'll be able to go back and forth with some of those through a forum. And then on Wednesday, we'll be able to talk a little bit about the text and some of the implications that it has. So I'm going to stop there so this doesn't go on too long. I know it's hard to watch a really long video. I might put up a few more this week, brief videos, just to give you some guidance as you go. I hope everybody's doing well. Please feel free to reach out to me on email or through Moodle if you have questions or concerns or just want to chat. I'm thinking maybe I'll put together a Google Hangout office hours a little bit later, but just expect regular updates from me. Keep up with your reading, keep up with your journal, and hang in there, and we'll be in touch. Okay.